Hey guys, thanks for checking out today's video. I really just wanted to share some of this health stuff that I've been watching and learning recently because I think more people need to get and hear this stuff. It's really crucial that you potentially share this to some of your social media platforms so we can share this health information to everyone who needs to hear it, which is technically everybody on planet Earth.
Crisis is beneficial to the most powerful interests in the world, it's likely that you will see a perpetuation of crisis, endless crisis. If the military-industrial complex benefit from war, you will have war. If the pharmaceutical complex benefit from ill health, you will have the perpetuation of ill health. If they require you to eat food that's bad for you and take medicine that's bad for you, then you find that this great, wonderful nation, in which I'm a foreigner, traipsing willy-nilly back and forth that border, almost at will, popping in them cages that Obama built.
Right. So as long as there is money to be made off of crisis or catastrophe, we've seen in Hawaii, we've seen in LA, we've seen in North Carolina, we've seen all of those things. There's money to be made for all of those things. There's someone profiting from that catastrophe. And as long as that is the case, we're going to be in the situation that we're in. As long as there's money to be made for war, America's going to find ourselves in these wars that we've been in for 20, 30 years.
Instead of the greatest nation in the world, you have a kind of conveyor belt where we're sort of turned into larvae with parasitic tubes attached to us, one end being pumped full of sugar and seed oil, the other end being pumped full of needless pharmaceuticals.
Isn't that kind of crazy how he described it? We're like being pumped with pharmaceuticals and high fructose corn syrup as well as seed oils. And we haven't known about any of this stuff for quite a long time. We're actually just finding out about it now because the statistics that are coming out as of now of what our actual health crisis is so alarming.
8 years from now, our kids are going to be lost by the processed food industry, by the chemical industry, by the pharmaceutical industry that actually profit on sick children because all of these entities are making money on them. The insurance companies, the hospitals, the medical cartel, the pharmaceutical companies have lifetime annuities. I mean, any child and the earlier that kid is sick, they don't want to kill them. They want them sick for the rest of their lives.
That does make sense. To be honest, the idea to have someone have a chronic condition means that they need to go to the doctor and get some sort of treatment regularly for their entire life. Isn't that the most ideal contract the medical company could make with us citizens, is that they have linked together or hooked up with the food industry to make it so the food is poisonous, which then gives us problems with our health, which then makes us so I have to go to the doctor, and then it turns into a chronic condition because they don't actually treat what's wrong. They just treat the symptoms, and then it gets worse, becoming a chronic condition, and then you have to go to the doctor every month for the rest of your life. Isn't that seem evil and cruel?
And the processed food industry was created by the cigarette industry. And I think this is very telling. It's something I learned. So in the 1990s, the two largest food companies in the world were R.J. Reynolds and Philip Morris. What happened is when the Surgeon General way too late in the 1980s said cigarettes were maybe problematic, these were some of the largest companies in the world with the largest cash piles of any company in the world. So what they did is they used their cash piles to buy food companies. We think about the 80s as the Wall Street era M&A, a lot of deals. The two biggest M&A deals up until 1990 in world history were cigarette companies buying food companies. So you had in the 90s, these two cigarette companies very strategically do two things. They shifted their thousands of scientists who were experts at making cigarettes addictive to the food department. So we had the rise of ultra-processed food where our food now is a science experiment.
Okay, now first and foremost, cigarette companies buying food companies. I've talked about this specific thing before, but that is not something that should be okay. The most addictive substance that we had known during that period of time was found out that it is addictive and bad for you. So those companies decided to buy our food companies and just make it so we're addicted to food.
The second thing they did is they shifted their lobbying. So the cigarette industry, of course, was the biggest, lobbying spenders and had a good playbook. They shifted their playbook on lobbying and rigging institutions of trust to food. So they created the food pyramid. So the cigarette industry, through the food companies they bought, paid off the FDA, the USDA, Harvard to create reports saying sugar doesn't cause obesity. And they lobbied for the food pyramid in the 1990s, we all remember, which said, animal-based fats are bad, carbs are good. Remember, carbs and sugar were basically the base of the pyramid. So the American diet, because of that, because we trust our medical institutions, which they know, we shifted our diet significantly to ultra-processed food. It was very intentional, the food pyramid. That was a ultra-processed food marketing document that carbs were fine, sugar was fine. And that shifted, and you look at dietary patterns. Today, a child diet is 70% ultra-processed food.
That is really concerning. 70% ultra-processed foods. How are these kids ever supposed to actually gain some real strength and real health in their body if it's just being like bogged down with all these ultra processed foods and food dyes and corn syrup and seed oils and all of these things? It seems quite unfair that these children don't really have a choice, and the adults that might be in power or have been in power are the ones making the decisions that are affecting every kid in the entire country.
Now, what does that mean, right? Those are literally foods invented by the cigarette industry to addict kids.
Like you said, it's all intentional to addict children. Now, isn't that just really crazy to think about? Is that they're not trying to harm people, they're just trying to make it addictive, so you spend your entire your life, all of your money, all of your time worrying about this thing instead of actually curing your illness. It's really wild to really think about, to be honest, how we've even got to this far. If you want, go ahead and comment below what you think is the biggest necessary change that we need to make as Americans, or just as humans in general, to benefit our health.
Obviously we've got sugar, but there's thousands of different ingredients and science concoctions that scientists work in a lab to make it more palatable, to make it more addictive. So food consumption, calorie consumption has skyrocketed. And the byproduct of these toxic ingredients that the cigarette industry I watched and helped with this, bought off the USDA, bought off the FDA, is they wreak havoc among our cells. The foundation of our diet is ingredients that we aren't biologically made to eat, that didn't exist 100 years ago. The foundation of our diet is three things when you look at any label. It's added sugar, processed sugar, which basically didn't exist 100 years ago. It's just from natural sources. Ultra-processed grains, which were invented 100 years ago. The processing takes the fiber off. They're basically hidden sugars, devoid of nutritional value. And seed oils. Seed oils are the top source of American calories. And this is actually
seed oil, the top source of American calories.
Soybean oil, canola oil. This is the baseline of American calories right now. And these seed oils were actually created by John D. Rockefeller as a byproduct of oil production. It's basically engine lubricant. And the Rockefeller and those aligned with him actually lobbied to have this suitable for human consumption. That's how seed oils came into the American diet. They're much cheaper, but they're highly inflammatory. And just by definition, just at the highest level, these ingredients and all the chemicals we can't name that are in ultra-processed food are not natural ingredients that our bodies are made to handle. So there's, as we talk about in Good Energy, this produces a lot of side effects to ourselves. The food industry isn't trying to kill Americans. They're trying to make food cheap and addictive. And what I learned, in the morning meeting with the food companies trying to lobby and influence the USDA being the lifeblood of nutrition research, paying off, nutrition research at Harvard and Stanford as a junior employee, shocked by that.
So you saw that?
Oh, my first week, as working for these industries, it was a list of top professors. And the food industry pays 11 times more for foundational nutrition research than the NIH. You go to any nutrition school in the country, the lifeblood of their school, they'll proudly admit this is from the processed food industry. In the past 2 years, there's been 50,000 peer-reviewed research studies on nutrition. We're the only animal that has peer-reviewed nutrition studies, and we're the only animals that are systematically obese, diabetic, and being crippled by metabolic dysfunction. We're born with an innate sense of knowing what's right for us. The problem, very strategically, and this is well known among the industry, is that ultra-processed food does, because they're able to do this science experiment with our food, it hijacks our biology, it hijacks our satiety signals. High fructose corn syrup, fructose, it makes us want to eat more. Because in the wild, when you see a bunch of fruit out there, you're well advised to eat it, historically. We've basically rigged our biology to hijack our signals that, make us satiated. So that's what ultra-processed food does. So that's the food industry, okay? The food industry actually, with their own set interests, want to make food addictive and cheaper. It kind of makes sense. The criminal devil's bargain is that it's highly tied to the healthcare industry. And as Casey said, the fastest growing industry in America right now isn't AI. It's not tech, it's healthcare. It's the largest and fastest growing industry. And just as a statement of economic fact, the best thing for that industry is a child getting sick. When a child gets sick, or any American gets sick with a chronic condition, with diabetes, obesity, kidney disease, heart disease, whatever, they go on a lifetime medication. They go on the metformin, they go on the statin, they have lifetime treatments. And they keep racking up more comorbidities. If you're diabetic, you have an average of 4 other comorbidities. So you keep racking up, but you don't die, you just suffer. You inevitably get infertility, depression. You start racking them up. So that's very good for the medical system to have these chronic conditions that need to be managed. Just from a pure economic standpoint, that's how the system's set up. That's all happening largely because of our food system and other metabolic habits we can talk about, but largely because of our rise of ultra-processed food that's really, really hacking our cells and really hijacking our cells. The criminal part, the devil's bargain, is that the healthcare system, you'd expect to be speaking out about why we're getting so sick, but they're not only silent on the reasons, they're not only trained Casey the first day of Stanford Med School that we're basically taking it as a given that people are lazy and going to get sick. We're just going to profit from treating them.
That's from Stanford Med School. Can you believe that she got taught that? Is that people are just going to get lazy and be sick and that we just need to profit as much as we can off of them? That's very sinister.
They're silent enough. They're actually complicit. Working for Coke, I helped steer money to the American...
Coca-Cola.
Yeah, working for Coca-Cola, they actually pay money to the American Diabetes Association. They actually pay money to the American Academy of Pediatrics. If there's one thing the American Diabetes Association, which sets the standard of care for diabetes management, should be doing, they should be saying, we're not going to accept money from Coke, which is diabetes water. They accept money from Coke. So
that's like Tyson Chicken subsidizing PETA.
Right.
And you walk through the average person's experience of health insurance and medical care.
So the average American, because of our food and our diet and our lifestyle, 90% of chronic disease is driven by lifestyle. If we peel back and look at what's causing these chronic diseases and get to the root cause, it's not just diet, lifestyle, and nutrition. It's that the system is failing Americans. Again, there is no safety net anymore. Your clinician doesn't have the time to do a deep dive. So the cancer that develops in your 40s started in your 30s. The diabetes that develops in your 40s started in your 30s. The chronic disease that hits you in your 50s started in your 40s. If we got proactive and predictive, we could prevent chronic disease. And chronic disease is killing 1.8 to 1.9 million Americans a year, more than every war we've ever fought since the history of this country. We are chronically ill as a society.
More than every war than we've ever fought as this country, chronic illness has taken more lives. Isn't that terrifying? What's the craziest thing is that there's a whole bunch of people, institutions, doctors, etc., that know that what they can do to fix it. And a lot of these companies are giving pushback on wanting to fix it. Like, for example, red dye 3 just was banned recently, and the companies that use red dye 3 don't actually have to stop making or selling the product with the red dye 3 until 2027 because profits, basically. It's really wild to me.
And if we look at the pillars of what's causing that, one branch is the big pharmaceutical industry.
Yes.
Another branch is the food industry. But the other dirty branch is the insurance companies. They are implicitly involved in this.
Cancer rates rising in the young at rates we've never seen before.
Even though young people don't smoke cigarettes.
No, it's the food. Colon cancer is the biggest thing.
But it's just a little crazy. Again, this is the benefit of being in your 50s because you sort of remember what the previous lies were. But like if we get rid of smoking, I'm not endorsing smoking, then cancer is just going to cease to exist.
Well, certain cancers like lung cancer and other cancers have gone down. But when you see cancer rates increasing in children, like by 30%, you see autoimmune diseases up 100%. You see mental health issues up 80%. You see autism up 1,000%, ADD up 200%, diabetes up 400%, Alzheimer's up 150%. So we are screwing up here big time by not dealing with the root cause. And we're spending on all those conditions 200 to 300% more on drugs.
But actually,
now that's wild. All the statistics, all the things that are going up in diagnosis, that's directly because of our diets and our health. If we taught kids about exercise and about breath work and about grounding, maintaining mental health, that you should only really be eating food that comes from the earth, the food that you never see commercials about, that's the food you should be eating. But if we teach them that, then maybe the statistics will go down. But I don't know, it seems kind of overwhelming and kind of too far out there for us to actually get a handle on. Do you think that we're going to get a handle on this? Comment below if that's what you think.
Shows up in life expectancy, which is unbelievable. There's an 8-year gap of life expectancy between high school grads who have a life expectancy of around 75 and college grads who have a life expectancy of around 83. Can you imagine? This is two different societies. And to the point of how long you live, whether you're healthy or not. And this has been going on for decades now and completely almost ununderstood and unaddressed. And the political system more or less incapable of solving anything, unfortunately.
It's interesting, though, how little anyone cares. I think these are complicated problems, very complicated problems. You suggested. Not exactly sure how to solve it, but I know that the first step is acknowledging it and caring about it.
And discussing it.
And you've been in, at least since you were an undergraduate at Harvard, in one world. I have too.
Yeah.
And so I can verify, I know you can as well, that there's no conversation about this, that everyone in the world that I grew up in blames the people who were dying earlier. hates them for it, hates them for their weakness and their suffering. That just strikes me as such an ugly, vicious impulse. I don't understand it.
It's crazy how life expectancy in America is what it is, and that we actually have a lower life expectancy than a lot of people in other high income countries, which is really wild because in those countries, certain toxins or ingredients that we have in our diet here in America is actually banned there because they've done testing and found out that it's toxic. So they're not even allowed to make food with toxic stuff. Yet we are here in America, and all the corporations and governments, all they really care about is profits, not really about people's health.
There's a metabolic health crisis among babies that are born. Mothers are passing metabolic dysfunction and essentially almost prediabetes onto kids in mass.
Now, first of all, before we watch the rest of this, I just have to say, this is so important to hear because if you don't know this, you need to tell people this. However toxic or unhealthy the mother is, there's a high chance that some of those diseases, conditions, ailments, disadvantages get passed on to the baby before the baby even is born. How is that fair to the baby to come into this world with bad metabolic health when they even haven't had the opportunity to make choices to determine what their health even is?
That's how bad this has gotten. Like kids are being born with dysfunctional microbiomes and metabolic dysfunction. And like, literally I've talked to Harvard doctors about that. I talked on one of the podcasts about this to a Harvard doctor. And she said that's a case for Ozempic, that babies are being born with such horrible metabolic dysfunction that we need to start jabbing them right away. I say that's a sign of a crisis. Well, and the fact that babies are being born sick is actually, maybe we shouldn't be doing more of the same and just keep drugging them more. We should actually be asking why there's a metabolic health crisis.
I do think that's a sign of a crisis. Why would it be that instead of getting the mother healthy and not passing down these problems, they just decided that they're going to start giving kids Ozempic? That's not right. Ozempic isn't a good thing. You should actually just eat good and exercise and get good sleep, as well as take care of your mental health. And I would assume that there would be no need for Ozempic, but we as a society just don't do that.
Among babies.
Yeah, there's a crisis in the way that we think.
Yeah.
I think
it's a root of a lot of, I think, what's happening. The biggest societal, I think, historical dynamic of the past, decade has been this populist uprising towards institutions. I don't think people can quite put their finger on it all the time, but there's this frustration that we're really being let down. To me, what's happening to our health and the gaslighting that's happening to our health and the fact that we're not hearing things like this and hearing that drugs are our saviors and just keep doing more of the same from industries that are profiting from that sickness. To me, it actually is the number one example of what's fueling this populist frustration. Healthcare is the largest industry, and it's something that's impacting these incentives. I think I would argue are impacting Americans across the kitchen table and impacting their lives more than any other industry.
Can I just ask one last question?
Yeah.
So one of the things I noticed about both of you is your mental acuity. Obviously, you're smart, but it's more than just smart. You're sharp and fast, and you have very quick recall. You're just crisp. I notice the way people talk, because I talk for a living. How big so bad food dulls you? I've always noticed that.
Absolutely.
What?
Well, I mean, for so many reasons, Tucker, but I mean, to name a couple of them, if you have a big blood sugar swing, which the average American, because the vast majority of our calories are coming from ultra-processed food that turn into glucose in our bloodstream, blood sugar, right? When you have a big glucose spike and crash, that is associated with reduced fat recall. Literally that crash and spike, like the post-meal crash, like you eat something and then you might feel lethargic afterwards. That's in part because your blood sugar is skyrocketing and crashing. The average American child is probably on this roller coaster all day long. We want stable, steady blood sugar levels. So we're not
making
crashing.
us dumber then. So
that's the short term, right? Over the long term.
Besides all of the stuff that you're worried about your health for, we really should be doing this and really trying to get this information and make changes for the children of the world, right? The children of the world who rely on adults to provide for them and keep them safe and make sure that they're healthy and they go to bed on time and that they learn the things that they need to learn. All of these things, the adults are the ones that are in charge, but the kids are the ones being affected. And I don't think that's really fair. I think it's actually quite evil and dark, to be honest.
We're building the machine of the body out of shoddy materials, right? And that's going to impact our brains. It's going to impact our, the way that we think. And, our microbiome makes a lot of our neurotransmitters. And we are just trashing our microbiome now, right? With ultra-processed food, no fiber. Fiber feeds the microbiome. The 95% of Americans aren't getting enough fiber. So we're not feeding the thing inside of us that makes our neurotransmitters, that helps us think. This is insanity. And then we're trashing the microbiome with antibiotics, which destroy we're overusing antibiotics like crazy, which destroy our microbiome and increase our risk of depression and other issues.
3 times more suicidal than you after taking them.
There is it's the all out warfare, and it makes you kind of step back and think, like, what's happening here? Like, we have this kind of like sort of like doled out, dumb. I'm not saying the Americans. I'm saying that, like, It's making
There's
us,
forces that
it's
want them dull.
reducing our IQs. It's making us lose our minds early with Alzheimer's. It's making our kids not able to sit down and learn because of ADHD and autism rates that are skyrocketing. And it's all going up all at once. And we know it's because of our toxic food systems and the chemicals in our environment.
They're all going up at once, and it's all coinciding together. And we know it's because of our toxic environment and the toxic and poisonous ingredients in our food. This is a call to action to everyone who watches this. You guys we really need to get a grasp on health as a whole. We need to really start not being okay and standing up to people and telling people, no, I don't want that, and why you don't want that. Hey, you shouldn't drink that, or you shouldn't eat that, and this is why. I try to do that to everyone in my reality. It's because everyone needs to know that they have in the shadows been taken advantage of, and your health is being held hostage, which is a direct connection to your mental health, which then is, if you don't have good mental health, then you're unhealthy and you have bad mental health. You're probably going to be severely depressed, and you might even move on to other phases of depression, which are really scary, when all of this could possibly be prevented if it just starts in the kitchen.
And we're not protecting kids. And that is very sinister. And I think, on the biggest macro level, like at the kind of the most zoomed out spiritual level, like I think, what we have to realize is that like we are miracles. Like every human is a miracle. This life is a miracle. Like spiritual beings having this insane experience on planet Earth. And fundamentally, the thing that we're doing with metabolic health is we're making energy in the body, right? The way we're doing that is we're taking food that got its energy from the sun, right? Like the sun literally, photosynthesis happens.
Like I've said before, planet Earth provides everything that we need as a living being. It provides all the medicine that we could need for any of the diseases we have. It provides all of the nutritional food and liquids that we could possibly need, whether that's fruit juice that comes from actually eating raw fruits, or the water that is provided all around us, as well as it provides air for us to breathe. We don't need anything but what Earth gives us. We have come to this society where we're all unhealthy and sick because we have turned away from what Mother Nature has decided to provide for us, and think that we are the ones that are in control and we can just make things to feed people. And we've come to find out that these foods that have been made by man are actually killing us. The water has poison in it. The air has poison in it. It's so scary to think of how toxic of an environment that we currently live in as humans, especially Americans. That's not including the plastics that are everywhere, or the fragrances, or the things that are inside of your makeup products that are poisonous for you, etc., 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 etc. It's time now for us as humans to take control of our health, take control of our mental health, and stop purchasing and contributing to these companies that sell us poison. And with that, peace out, motherfucker.